Anybody, episode 668 of the podcast, and Assuming America, the Tour Sports Podcast presented by Betfred Sportsbook. It is Friday, February 17th, 2023. People, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is having a great day, and I hope everybody is ready for a jam-packed Friday edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. And when I tell you we got a lot to talk about, we got ourselves a lot to talk about on today's show. Here's what you need to know about this Friday show. We're going to open the big story in college basketball. Chris Beard, former Texas head coach, had been fired. Well, charges were dropped for him. You know, the criminal charges were dropped on Wednesday. And the immediate question now becomes, is this guy going to coach again? And when will it happen? Not saying it should happen, but will it happen? I think it will. We'll discuss all that. We'll talk a little bit about some of these scores over the last few nights. Obviously, the big notable score, number one, Alabama loses. What does it all mean? From there, we'll take a quick break. One college football story that I do think is worth talking about. Notre Dame has been looking for an offensive coordinator over the last couple weeks. Who it is, I don't think it is important. What is important, though, is how they got there. And I'll just tell you this. Notre Dame wants to be a big boy. They did not act like a big boy this week. I'll explain all that. And then finally, we will wrap with America's favorite podcast segment, Friday staple of the show, Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. A lot to get into today. Busy Friday show. So let's not waste any more time. And with that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, there is a mega story in college basketball over the last couple days. Chris Beard, the head coach formerly of the University of Texas, was fired in January after being arrested in December on criminal domestic assault charges. Okay, felony domestic assault charges. Well, on Wednesday, those charges were officially dropped by the alleged victim, Chris Beard's fiance. And as soon as those charges were dropped, the question becomes very straightforward. Will Chris Beard ever coach college basketball again? And so I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'll give you exactly what I think, and then we'll kind of get into the details and the context behind everything. But I'll tell you this. When Chris Beard was arrested, when Chris Beard was fired, I said I thought he would never coach college basketball again. Well, here we are 2 months later, and I think that's something, whether you agree or disagree. It's not really what matters in my opinion. But I do believe that Chris Beard probably will coach college basketball again. And so let's get into it. Let's talk about it. And obviously a quick disclaimer. The next 6, 7, 8 minutes, whatever this ends up being, we're going to talk about some very serious things, very serious things. So be cognizant of who is listening with you. I don't know if you're in the car with family or friends, but keep that in mind because let's be blunt. There's going to be some serious topics to discuss going forward. Keep that in mind. But details that you need to know, and we don't have to get into all of them, but I want to make sure, you guys and girls have context. But as I said, Chris Beard, very successful college basketball coach. Some saw him as one of the probably 3 or 4 best coaches in college basketball. On December 12th, we all woke up to a police report that he had been arrested. And as I just said, charged with felony domestic assault. We all remember where we were and what we saw when we saw him walking out of a courthouse in handcuffs, in a jumpsuit, with a mask on. We all realized this was really bad. He was put on administrative leave, and he was ultimately fired in early January. And like I said, when this all happened, I said point blank, end of story, I don't think this guy ever coaches college basketball again. So the question becomes, why did I feel that way? Well, it was really 2 reasons. The first one, all you had to do was go read the police report, okay? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a criminal defense expert. But what I said at the time was this. Even if this young woman, the accuser, eventually drops charges, which unfortunately in a lot of cases like this, that often happens. But even if she drops the charges, the police report has a lot of very gruesome details on what happened. And I didn't think Chris Beard would ever be able to shake those details. One, as I said at the time, both sides in the police report agree there was an incident. Now, Chris Beard has a different version than his fiance, but at the end of the day, if they both agree there's an incident, it's hard to shake that. Chris Beard can't claim he wasn't there, can't claim he didn't see anything, can't claim he didn't do anything. they both agree that something did happen. But then more importantly, and I thought this was a proverbial, and I'm not being literal, but a proverbial smoking gun. There were marks on this woman. There were bite marks. There were scratches. There were cuts on her face. And I just said at the time, that is going to be something, again, that I think sticks with Chris Beard forever. Obviously, the police report alleged that he choked her, that he threw her on the floor. Again, very serious issues. But as I said, Chris Beard can't, whether Chris Beard claims this or whether his fiance claims this or whether the charges are dropped, the bottom line is those two things really stood out to me. One, they both agree that some sort of incident happened. And two, at the end of the day, she had in the police report, according to the police report, marks on her that kind of indicated that some kind of domestic incident happened. And so at the time, I said, point blank, end of story, I don't think this guy will ever coach again for two simple reasons. One, it's going to be very hard for any athletic director to sell to his school president, to a board of trustees, to prominent alums, to boosters, to everyone in the community that Chris Beard should be the face of a major university, okay? That Chris Beard should be the face of a major university, not after this incident. Two, I thought, and to a degree still think, it's going to be really hard for him to recruit as the face of a university because he's going to have to go into homes of young men and he's going to have to look every mom in the eye and dad too, but mostly mom in the eye and explain what happened, what really happened, and why they should trust him with their son. So at the time, in December and in January, I said he's never going to coach again because I don't believe that a school will allow him to be the face of the university after what he was alleged. But then two, I think even if they wanted to, it's going to be so hard to sell in recruiting. How do you go into a home? How do you tell mom, I'm going to turn your son from a boy to a man? You know what mom's going to say? Mom's say, you better not. He better not turn out like you. I'm not sending him to you. And so at the time, that was how I really felt. But I will say this, as time has gone on, things have changed. I've already heard from multiple fans, multiple fan bases, people in the athletic space. Now I'll say this, I don't think most ADs like him. I don't think most ADs like the idea of hiring him. And I will tell you, the people in the coaching community, I don't believe have very much respect for this guy. I've talked to 2 or 3 guys that are just like, it makes me sick. I have daughters. I have a wife. I have a mother, whatever. I have granddaughters in some cases. The fact that this guy is going to get an opportunity makes my skin crawl. But as I always say on this show, there's a difference between what could happen, what should happen, and what will happen. On top of that, there's a difference between what I would do and what somebody else would do. And as time has gone on, I do feel like Chris Beard is going to coach again. Now, listen, personally, if it was me, I probably wouldn't hire him. And I'm not here to sit here on my high horse and say I'm perfect and I've never made a mistake and I can do no wrong. But I do think there's a difference between I've made mistakes and this guy, according, again, to a police report, it's not my opinion, I didn't read it on a message board. This guy put his hands on a woman to the degree that it left marks on her. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Torres, you've defended other people. You said that you believe that other people are allowed to work. And I do believe it. Like, listen, Chris Beard's allowed to have a job. I just wouldn't personally hire him. And I think it's important at this moment in time to differentiate between Chris Beard and some other prominent college coaches. Because whenever I bring this up, people are going to say, well, Torres, you're defending Rick Pitino and you're saying Rick Pitino should be hired by St. John's. And what I would say is this. Rick Pitino, what we know, what Rick Pitino himself is guilty of. He had an extramarital affair in a restaurant, mind you, but an extramarital affair. That is not a criminal offense. Now, some of the recruiting stuff, I'm not saying I encourage it. And I'm not saying that in my heart of heart, I don't believe that Rick Pitino really did not know what's going on. But according to the facts that we have, Rick Pitino wasn't involved in that recruiting stuff, and the personal stuff is personal stuff. I might not like it, I might not want, my daughter, if I had a daughter, I wouldn't want her to marry him or marry someone like him. But there's a difference between what Rick Pitino did and what is in the police report that Chris Beard is alleged to have done, even if the charges are dropped. Same with Bobby Petrino. There's a big difference between screwing up your personal life and criminal charges that are ultimately dropped. Same with Hugh Freeze. I could go on and on. But there is a big difference between that and what Chris Beard was accused of, what was in the police report surrounding this Chris Beard stuff. And so if it was just personally me, I probably wouldn't hire him. And I do think there's going to be a lot of ADs that say, I can't, not this one. You guys and girls, you're going to have to go in another direction. But as I always say, in any incident like this, when it involves a prominent coach, it only takes one AD, and this guy has won a lot. And I think that's something that we do kind of have to separate, whether we want to or not. On the court, he's a heck of a coach, right? It's kind of staggering. 8 years as a college head coach. NCAA tournament was canceled in 2020. But this was year number 8 for him. In the previous 7, 5 NCAA tournaments, it would have been 6, but 2020 COVID was canceled. Won an NCAA tournament game at Little Rock. Took Texas Tech to 2 Elite Eights and a Final Four in 2019. Texas is a team good enough to win the national championship this year. He is really, really, really good. And so I do believe somebody is going to give him a chance. Now, I think the two interesting questions, if you want to put aside what was in the police report, what he is accused of doing, and the basketball perspective of it, I think what's interesting is 2 things. One, does he get a coaching job this coaching cycle? And 2, does he have to go to the low major route as opposed to the high major route to begin with? In other words, Hugh Freeze ended up at Liberty after his situation. Bobby Petrino started at Western Kentucky after his situation. And so again, I'm not dismissing what happened. I'm not even saying that I would hire him if I was in charge. But we have to accept a reality that he is going to be hired at some point. And I think from that perspective, those are the interesting questions. Does he start at a low major and build himself back up? Or does he go straight to the high major level? And how soon does it happen? Now, how soon does it happen? I don't know if it'll be this year. I don't know if any AD will have the interest in doing it. But even if an AD has the interest in doing it, again, I don't know if he'll get a sign-off from a school president, from a board of trustees, from his big donors or her big donors, obviously, whoever. So there's that element of it. I don't know if it's going to be this year. And I would add this year, the jobs that are going to potentially open probably don't make that much sense for Chris Beard, right? Like Georgetown's going to open. I don't see Chris Beard at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Georgia Tech's probably almost certainly going to open. I don't see Chris Beard at an engineering school in Atlanta. Berkeley is going to open. Don't see that one for Chris Beard. University of Washington is probably going to open. Don't see that one for Chris Beard. So I don't know if it's going to be this year. I just think it's probably too soon. And I don't think the jobs that are going to open have any interest in getting in the Chris Beard business. I will say this, though. You start to look at what jobs could potentially be open at this time next year or February, March of 2024. That's a different deal altogether. Think about some of the jobs that could open up next year. Kenny Payne, and Nick Coffey talked about this on the show last week. Now, he didn't talk about Chris Beard. I don't want to put words in Nick Coffey's mouth. But Nick Coffey covers Louisville on a day-to-day basis. And if Kenny Payne doesn't significantly improve next year, they are literally, Nick laid it out, the worst Power 5, Power 6 team in the history of the Ken Pomeroy era. So we're talking 20 plus years. They're the worst Power 5 team, Power 6 team. If Kenny Payne doesn't improve significantly in the next year, I think he's probably getting fired next year. 2 and done. They'll give him till this offseason, but if he doesn't hit the portal hard and he doesn't flip this roster quick and he doesn't show major signs of improvement, I don't think he's back next year. Can I see Louisville hiring Kenny Payne? Now, I know they have a checkered past. I know Tom Jurich was the guy that hired Bobby Petrino and Rick Pitino and stood by Rick Pitino with the first incident and rehired Bobby Petrino. So I don't know if the new AD would, but is it inconceivable after whiffing on Chris Mack and whiffing on Kenny Payne? I could see it happening. Give you another one. LSU. The fans are already growing restless with Matt McMahon. We've had Matt McMahon on the show. I like Matt McMahon. Seems like a good guy. I don't know him well, but it's not working. They're in last place in the SEC right now. Behind Ole Miss, behind Georgia, behind whoever. Pick your worst team. Vanderbilt. LSU is worse. And LSU, remember, you can criticize Will Wade for whatever you want. They made a bunch of NCAA tournaments under Will Wade. They made an NCAA tournament last year with an interim head coach after Will Wade had been fired. LSU, Scott Woodward, I could see him potentially biting the bullet and saying, this is the best coach I'm ever going to get. I got to take a chance because we're in a loaded SEC that, of course, is adding Texas and Oklahoma. I'll give you one more. What about Texas Tech? You understand that Texas Tech right now, they made the Sweet 16 last year in the first year post Chris Beard. But beyond that, this season they're terrible. Now, they've had injuries. Mark Adams, I don't personally have an issue with Mark Adams, but they're tied for last place as I record here in the Big 12. They finish in last place this year. They finish in last place next year. They're going to be looking for a head coach. And I don't think it gets any easier next year when now you add Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati to the mix. Now, Central Florida, I don't know if Central Florida is going to put up much of a fight, but the Big 12 is going to be tough again next year, going to be the best conference of college basketball next year. You mean to tell me if he finishes in 9th or 10th or 11th place in the Big 12 next year that Mark Adams is going to survive? Now, people say, oh, they'll never rehire Chris Beard. Really? Texas Tech wants to be good. He brought them to a level that the program has never been. So could I see Texas Tech hiring Chris Beard? I absolutely could. And so again, we have to separate what should happen with what very likely will happen. And listen, we all, to some degree, whether you're a female yourself, and I know we have a lot of female listeners, I'm not trying to diminish your opinions, but we all have mothers, sisters, daughters, granddaughters. There's a difference between what should happen and what will happen. And I'm just saying, now that the charges are dropped, I do think Chris Beard is going to be a college basketball head coach probably pretty soon. We're getting back to the show in a minute, but before we do, I want to welcome back our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. By now, you know Betfred's story. Started in 1967 in the UK. Over 1,600 shops in the UK have come to the United States and made a major splash. They are the presenting sponsor of the Cincinnati Bengals, Colorado Rockies, Denver Broncos. And what I love about working with Betfred, nobody does more for their customers than Betfred does. Okay, I've told you before, but I'm going to keep telling you. Cincinnati Bengals games, that Betfred suite is rocking. They had a New Year's Eve into New Year's Day party for the launch of sports betting in the state of Ohio. Shout out to all of you who were there. Obviously, beyond that, there is the Denver Broncos VIP tailgates. We have sent listeners of this show to those tailgates. Colorado Rockies, first pitch at those games. Betfred does more for their customers than anybody, and here is what they are doing for listeners of the Aaron Torres podcast, okay? So what you got to do. Bet 50 on any game, and new users, how about this? Get up to $1,000 in free bets. There are no catches. There are no gimmicks. Here's what you need to know. Bet 50 on any game, you get automatically $111 in free bets. But beyond that, you get $200 insurance on your first 5 weeks as a Betfred customer. So you decided, hey, I'm going to bet this big game, $100, $200, whatever. You end up losing it. They're going to insure you for that game. So up to 5 weeks, up to $200 plus $111 for signing up for Betfred today. You're going to want to do it. Download the Betfred Sportsbook app. Tell them Torres sent you. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, the Betfred Sportsbook. Because there was more college hoops that I want to get to and a couple results from the last couple days. Number 1, Alabama lost at Tennessee. Don't know that there's huge takeaways there, but we'll discuss that one in a minute. And also some other results, Texas A&M taking care of Arkansas. Marquette now alone in first place in the Big East thanks to a win over Xavier. So a lot of interesting stuff that has happened over the last couple days. With that said, though, there was one story that I do think is absolutely worth discussing and a result that is worth discussing. And it came on Thursday night in the lovely city of College Park, Maryland. Back in my younger, youthful East Coast days, spent a few weekends in College Park. Don't have a ton of memories from those weekends for maybe some reasons you can probably guess. And I'm guessing there's a lot of college students that are not going to, or they're going to wake up with a little bit of a headache today. That is because the Purdue Boilermakers walked into College Park, Maryland, hadn't played since Super Bowl Sunday. They lost on Super Bowl Sunday to Northwestern. Purdue was number 1. They're now number 3. I don't even think they're going to be number 3 anymore, because after losing on Sunday to Northwestern, they go to Maryland and they get smacked across the face. Final score 68-54. And let me just tell you this. Credit to Maryland. We'll talk about Maryland in a minute, but this is all about Purdue, and it is all about what I've been telling you all year. I think they're a fine college basketball team. I think they're a good college basketball team. I've never bought into the narrative that they're the best team in the country. I think they're destined once again to disappoint in the NCAA tournament. And I'm just going to say what nobody else will. Everybody else is trying to paint Matt Painter as this incredible basketball savant. I think the guy might be a little bit overrated. So let's get into it. Thursday night, College Park. And listen, I don't need to get too much into the game, but Purdue was struggling coming into this one. They had lost 2 of their last 3, lost at Indiana a few weeks ago, lost to Northwestern on Sunday, but this one was different. Both those games were close. Both those games were competitive. This one was largely not competitive. Now, I do think Maryland is uniquely built to give Purdue fits. They're smaller, they're faster, they're super athletic, they spread the floor, they shoot a lot of threes, but this one wasn't even competitive. Purdue loses by 14. Most of the second half was double figures. And what this comes down to is what I have been telling you all season long. People were acting like this is some crazy, huge, shocking upset. I have been saying from the beginning, I believe Purdue is a fine college basketball team, but I believe they are probably somewhere between like the 7th to 12th, 7th to 15th best team in college basketball. You can go back and listen to the tape. I get a lot of stuff right. I get a lot of stuff wrong. That's why we do Aaron right, Aaron wrong. I have been consistent on this Purdue thing. Let me just explain to you who Purdue is for people who do not watch them or have not watched them, okay? 7'3", incredible talent in Zach Edey down low. Probably your national player of the year. I don't know if anybody's going to catch him. I think you could argue at this point there are players just as important to their roster. Trace Jackson Davis from Indiana. Kansas is Jalen Wilson. But the point is, in line to win the national player of the year, okay? Here's the problem with Purdue. Outside of him, they have a grand total of 1 player who averages more than double figures a game. That's freshman guard Fletcher Lawyer, and they have 1 player who averages more than 5 rebounds a game. That's Caleb First, a big man down low. So really, you take out Zach Edey. I don't even know if this is an NCAA tournament team, and let me take it a step further. They have no one consistent besides Zach Edey. They play 2 freshman guards in the backcourt, Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith. Neither of those guys is elite. We did our preseason or our midseason All-American teams and freshman All-American teams this past year. Both those guys are massive overachievers, but neither was ranked in the top 85 of last year's high school class. So you have 2 freshman guards and neither of them is elite. This isn't Derrick Rose. This isn't John Wall. This isn't, whoever. I'm just trying to think of other good freshman guards over the last couple of years. Tyus Jones, who led Duke to a national championship. Kyrie Irving when he was at Duke. These aren't those kinds of guys. So you have nothing consistent besides Zach Edey, 2 freshman guards. And let me take it a step further. I don't think they have a surefire NBA player on their roster. Will Zach Edey maybe get a shot? Maybe. Is there somebody else that maybe develops into a pro at some point? Maybe. But I think it's far from certain that any of these guys ever see the court in the NBA. And so let me ask you one simple question. Does a team whose best player is a 7'3" center, and that's really it, nothing consistent around him, 2 guards that are freshmen, neither projected to go to the NBA, as a matter of fact, no one on the roster is projected to go to the NBA. Does that sound like a team that is going to win 6 straight games and march to you? No, it doesn't. And it goes back to what I've said all year. I think they're fine. I think they're good. I told you 3 or 4 days ago, I named a bunch of teams in college basketball that I thought were better built to win the tournament than them. UCLA, Baylor, Texas, Arizona, I think is better built to win in the tournament than they are. Alabama, I think Houston is. I think Kansas is. That's already 8 teams right there. You need me to keep going? That's the point, and that's the bottom line. And so I've never bought the hype. And I will say, I think the hype has largely been generated by two things. One, they went to Portland and played in that PK 85 event. It was fun. It was great. Their big wins there were against Gonzaga and Duke. Here's the problem. Duke right now is unranked. Duke right now is fine. They're not elite, though, and they were even worse when Purdue played them. Oh, by the way, Gonzaga, we've talked about them a million times. Gonzaga is fine. They're not elite. I've tried to tell you since April they are not an elite team. And so when I look at why Purdue is ranked so high, they built up their out-of-conference resume off of that, and then let's call a spade a spade. The Big Ten isn't good this year. The Big Ten is always overrated, but the Big Ten is especially overrated this year. Outside of Purdue, who do you really like in the Big Ten? I'll tell you who I like. I actually think Indiana and my boy Mike Effin Woodson is good. Jalen Hood-Schifino is an NBA guard. Trace Jackson-Davis is an incredible college basketball player, and they have three-point shooting around him. NBA guard, elite big man, three-point shooting, that is the key to success. I think this Maryland team has a chance to be very good in the tournament. Small, athletic, quick, spacing, ball movement, three-point shooting. Outside of that, look at this league. Michigan State's terrible. Iowa's terrible. Rutgers is 16-10. Michigan is 14-12. Wisconsin is 15-10. Illinois is all right, 17-8, but they've been up and down all year. This league is overrated, and Purdue is doing what they always do. They're taking advantage. They're beating the teams that they're supposed to, and this year there are more teams that they're supposed to beat than previous years. And so I've never bought into them. And let me take it a step further. I don't think this team is advancing beyond the Sweet 16. I think it's going to be another crushing loss for Matt Painter. And I'll say something that no one else in the media will say, and I'll get crushed for saying it. I think he's the most overrated coach in college basketball. I think he's really good. I think he's a developer of talent. I think he's got a keen eye for talent. But you listen to other people in the media talk about Matt Painter. They talk about him like he's, Picasso. Like he's John Wooden and Red Auerbach and Rick Pitino in his prime all rolled into one. Here is Matt Painter's resume, and I don't understand why I'm the only one that calls this guy out on it. He has, can you believe this? This is an incredible stat. I don't think people realize, okay? So he has been at Purdue for a while now. He has, to his credit, 12 top 4 finishes in the Big Ten. In theory, that's really good. Really consistent for a really long time. I'm not going to discredit him for that. But at the same time, come tournament, tighter schedule, narrower windows. You got to prep faster. You got to face different teams, different opponents. You don't have 4 days to get ready for a game. He has 1 Elite Eight, 0 Final Fours, 0 national championships. And so it's not to say he's a bad coach, but the way people talk about, like if you ask most people, top 5 college basketball coaches, he's probably in there. What? For a bunch of Sweet 16s and top 4 finishes and 1 Elite Eight? I'm sorry, I don't see it. And so maybe this is the year, but I don't think it is. And yes, some credit goes to his ability to develop, his ability to identify talent. That's fine. But if you're a great talent, like if your ceiling is being a top 15 team, but never really a threat, that's fine. But can we stop talking about you like you're a threat? Because that's how I feel like it is. So I'm done with Purdue. I'm done crushing Purdue. Credit to Maryland. But I'm just telling you, I'm planting my flag right now. Purdue will be out by the Sweet 16 once again this year. I think Indiana is built to advance further than them. Really quickly, Maryland, just want to give them a bunch of credit. Listen, I've done the Maryland spiel before. Maryland's kind of an amazing program. So for people of a certain generation, they were an elite program, and I don't think people realize this. This is an incredible stat. From 1994 until 2003, so a span of 10 years, 10 seasons, they made 7 Sweet 16s and 2 Final Fours. That is unbelievable. That is how good this program can be, and it has never been that after Gary Williams retired in 2011. They bring in Mark Turgeon, and Mark Turgeon just, you know what he reminds me of? Reminds me a little of Randy Edsall, the former UConn head coach, where everything is everybody else's fault. It's the Maryland can't win because they're in the Big Ten. They can't do this. They can't do that. It's like at some point it has to fall on the coach. He leaves. Kevin Willard comes in from Seton Hall, and they immediately upgrade. So credit to Maryland. I think they're a really good team. I think they're another team. I think that they can go potentially further than Purdue in this tournament. I don't know if they will, but I think it's possible. Credit to Maryland. Quickly, a few other scores from the last couple of days. Listen, number 1 Alabama fell at Tennessee. Final score in Knoxville. Fun game, entertaining game. Not a lot of fouls called in that one. 68-59. Listen, I know everybody wants the Torres hot take. I don't think there is one. The game was in Knoxville. The game was called in a manner which very much favored Tennessee. Tennessee is maybe the most physical team in maybe all of college basketball. And it was just a battle and a war, and they could have called a foul on every play. They did finish with 37 total fouls, but it resulted with, not a lot of Alabama fans will tell you, and I'm not blaming Alabama fans. They'll tell you that there should have been more calls, blah, 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 this and that. It was called evenly both games. And so as somebody who has complained about SEC refereeing, I can't sit here and get mad because the referees called not as many fouls as you would like if they called it consistently. 21 fouls for Alabama, 18 for Tennessee. Tennessee takes 25 foul shots, Alabama 20. Bottom line, I thought Tennessee was the better team that day, and I think we all should have known something funny was going to happen when Tennessee, coming off back-to-back losses, was a 3-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook. And so I can't overreact. I think Alabama's going to be fine. They get Georgia at home on Saturday, and I think they're going to smack the you-know-what out of Georgia. Alabama's going to be fine. And if you're Tennessee, enjoy this one. But with the way that Alabama played, 35% shooting from the field, their worst effort of the game of the season, to go along with 19 turnovers, that's probably a game you probably should have won a little bit more. Tennessee finished with 15 more shot attempts and 5 more free throws. You actually would have liked to see Tennessee win a little bit more, but they get the win. Credit to them. Staying in the SEC, listen, we'll talk about it with Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. Arkansas, man, I really thought Arkansas was turning a corner. I really thought after the win at Rupp, they were in really good shape. They have now lost 2 straight, including at Texas A&M on Wednesday night. Want to give a little credit to Buzz Williams, though. Listen, Buzz Williams, I've said it on this show. We've talked about it. He's a really good basketball coach. And I think he and Texas A&M were more hurt by the 2021 COVID year. Remember, that was the year after COVID. We tried to play a season, but it was with all these restrictions. Buzz Williams is a culture guy. He's an accountability guy. He's the term they use in basketball is he likes to have his hands on you. That's not a physical, literal thing. That's a metaphorical. He wants to coach you. He wants to be around you. And I thought that 2021 season was just a weird year overall. And that program actually shut down for about a month. They had a COVID pause for like 3 weeks. They had travel restrictions. There was a big ice storm that eliminated some games. And so I just bring it up because I always felt like they got set behind by that. They got hot last year. They struggled early in this season, but now they're rolling. They beat Arkansas. They're now 11-2 in SEC play. And with 5 games left in league play, they've all really but wrapped up a top 4 seed in Nashville for the SEC tournament. They get the win. And I'm just telling you, Buzz Williams is that dude. Listen, the stats I love on Buzz Williams came from Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech had never made 3 straight NCAA tournaments before Buzz Williams. Year 3, 4, 5, they made 3 straight tournaments. Before that, Marquette, he was at Marquette, made a Sweet 16 in his final year, an Elite 8 the year before. So 2 Sweet 16s and an Elite 8. Marquette has not won a tournament game since he left. Buzz Williams is great. Congrats to him. Arkansas fans, I get your worries. Plenty of time for Arkansas to get things right. They have not been the same post return, last 2 games since they beat Kentucky at Rupp Arena. Arkansas fans, I get your worries. Really quickly, Kentucky, took care of business against Mississippi State. There's nothing to say. They got to win more. That was a quad 1 win for them. That's a big win, but none of it really matters if they don't take care of business at home against Tennessee this weekend. Kentucky still has Tennessee and Auburn at home, Florida and Arkansas on the road. Listen, I'm not smart enough to know what they have to do to lock in an NCAA tournament bid. I would say you're probably going to want to go 3-1 in those 4 games, though, to put yourself in really good position. You go 2-2, 1-4. Not to mention, you also have, a couple other games mixed in there. You have a game against Vanderbilt at home that you better win. If you're Kentucky, you better get that victory. So bottom line with Kentucky, I'm not going to go too crazy. I actually thought Mississippi State, Chris Jans coached his you-know-what off. They played so hard. He did everything he could defensively. could not hold on for the win, but I give them a ton of credit. Marquette, how about the Marquette Golden Eagles? They beat Xavier late. It was a wild game. They win by 1. They now have a 1-game lead in the Big East with 3 games to go, or with 5 games to go, excuse me. They still have at Creighton next week. That is going to be a big one. Creighton right now is tied for second place. There's a 3-way tie, Creighton, Providence, and Xavier. Creighton wins that game, they will be tied for first place against Marquette. If Marquette wins that game, they're probably winning the Big East regular season title. And finally, Creighton and Providence played a thriller the other day. Providence wins in double overtime. All right, so what I do want to take a quick break. Like I said, that football segment, we'll push it to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page, and instead, we'll wrap with America's favorite podcast segment, Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. Quick break. A lot of college hoops right there. Sorry, Purdue fans. It's the truth. Quick break. Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. Be right back. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. I do want to switch gears, and I want to hit on one quick college football topic from the last couple days, because I do think it's interesting. And I do think sometimes in life, as I say often on this show, it's not just that the story in the headline sometimes is interesting, but more often, and what I try to do on this show is take you behind the scenes. And sometimes the story behind the story is more interesting than the actual story itself. So the story is Notre Dame offensive coordinator. They've been looking for a guy. It appears as though they have their guy. But what's been interesting is following this from a distance over the last couple weeks. Because if you believe reports, there was a guy that Marcus Freeman wanted. There was a guy that Marcus Freeman had to have. The school would not let him take this guy. And it just leads me to believe one simple thing. Notre Dame claims they're ready to play big boy college football, but I'm not totally sure they are. So let's get into it. Let's discuss. But the story is, look, Tommy Rees was Notre Dame's offensive coordinator over the last couple years. He goes to Alabama about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. And if this was just a story about Notre Dame has hired an offensive coordinator, like, I wouldn't be talking about it. I don't really care. Unless you're a diehard Notre Dame fan, I don't think you would care. But what's been interesting is trying to figure out who it's going to be and how it's all going to play out. And so what's especially interesting is we heard a couple different names over the last couple weeks. Byron Leftwich, by the way, was briefly linked to the job. He, of course, was the former Tampa Bay offensive coordinator, longtime NFL quarterback, but Tampa Bay offensive coordinator during Tom Brady's Super Bowl run a few years ago. That didn't work out. And then really over the last week or so, it appeared as though there was one candidate that had emerged above all others. That was a gentleman named Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator at Utah. Last weekend, Andy Ludwig was flown into South Bend to, I guess, both interview for the job, but also get a feel for the campus, get to know the coaching staff, blah, 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 blah. They actually were seeing Marcus Freeman, the Notre Dame head coach, with Andy Ludwig at a Notre Dame hockey game last weekend. They weren't trying to hide that he was in town. They weren't trying to hide that he was a candidate. And so according to different reports, and there are a little bit conflicting reports on this one, but that Notre Dame got to the finish line and Andy Ludwig had a really big buyout to get out of his Utah contract, upwards of $3 million. But here's the crazy part. Notre Dame knew about the buyout when they brought him out. Marcus Freeman had kind of already talked to the people upstairs. They had said, if this is the guy you want, go get him. But apparently Notre Dame, according to a report from The Athletic, Pete Sampson, they thought, oh, we're Notre Dame. We'll negotiate a buyout. We won't pay nearly as much. And so Utah said, no. You can get our guy, but you got to pay every cent of his buyout. Notre Dame balked. Notre Dame refused to play the buyout, and Notre Dame did not get their guy. Now, it's worth noting there are conflicting reports about this. Pete Thamel, by the way, was actually the first one to talk about the buyout. Pete Thamel, I think the best college football reporter out there. But I bring it up because Pete Thamel says the buyout's an issue. The Athletic says the buyout's an issue. Now, it's worth noting Heather Dinich from ESPN, I guess, was on some show, and she said, no. I talked to sources at Notre Dame, and this was never the guy. Jack Swarbrick, the AD at Notre Dame, I guess, released a statement, didn't name names individually, but he said in terms of reports that we had our guy and we wouldn't pay him, that's not true. And so it's just this weird, big, bizarre fiasco that actually resulted with Notre Dame actually hiring an offensive coordinator on on Thursday, or at least it's reportedly going to head that way, as Gerard Parker, who was already on staff, is going to get the job. But why I bring it up is because it is this situation where it's clear, or it appears to be clear, that Marcus Freeman wanted his guy. Now, again, there's conflicting reports, but I believe that Marcus Freeman wanted his guy. I believe that he could not get the guy that he wanted. I believe this is a bad look for Notre Dame. Let me first say this. I believe that it's the truth that this was the guy they wanted for two reasons. One, don't tell me that the buyout wasn't the issue if Pete Thamel's reporting it. Pete Thamel, I don't know him personally. I know most guys and girls in the media space in college football. I don't know him personally. He's really good at his job, okay? And if he said the buyout was an issue, the buyout was an issue. But here's the other part to it. If the buyout wasn't an issue, and if this guy really wasn't the guy, like other people, now they're trying to put out leaks that this wasn't the guy. He was caught on video with Marcus Freeman at the hockey game. Do you think Marcus Freeman is going to parade somebody around knowing that there's media at the hockey game, knowing that people are going to see it? They were on the Jumbotron at the hockey game. But this was never the guy and they weren't going to hire him? Let me ask you guys and girls a question. You guys and girls have all dated at some point. When you bring a guy or girl home to meet mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or whoever, is it just some girl, some guy, or is it somebody that you're pretty serious about? You don't just bring Jan that you met at the state fair last weekend home to meet grandma and grandpa. It's got to be somebody that matters, or Jake or Bill or Steve that you met at the state fair. That's not how it works. If it's somebody important, you bring them home. You want your family to meet them. And if Marcus Freeman was comfortable enough with this being on the Jumbotron, then I'm sorry. This wasn't, he wasn't really our guy. No, it's clear this is the guy that Marcus Freeman wanted. It's clear that he did not get it. And for the third time and final time, this is just a really, really bad look for Notre Dame. Because here's the bottom line about the entire situation with Notre Dame right now. I don't know if Marcus Freeman is going to work as the head coach. I don't know if he is not. But what I do know is he was hired to bring Notre Dame into the 21st century in college football. Brian Kelly had been there forever. I love Brian Kelly. You guys and girls know how I feel about Brian Kelly. He had been there forever, very successful head coach, but it felt a little stale. He had been there for 15 years, whatever it was. He leaves, and you say, I want the exact opposite. I want young. I want dynamic. I want a recruiter. I believe that Marcus Freeman is going to be able to take this thing to the next level. Well, now, in really the first big decision that Marcus Freeman has to make, because remember, most of the staff stayed together post Brian Kelly, he went out, wanted a guy, and y'all didn't give him the support to get him. I don't know if Marcus Freeman's going to be the guy or not. I don't know if he's going to work or not. But if you are bringing him in as a 37-year-old, 36 when he was hired, you have to give him every resource needed to succeed. First-time head coach, young guy. You're bringing him in because of his recruiting chops and his ability to relate to. You have to put him in position to succeed. And Notre Dame sees a $3 million buyout and they won't sign up for that. Give me a break. And it brings me to the point of Notre Dame says they're ready to compete in big boy college football, but are they really? Because let me ask you this. If Nick Saban told his AD, this is the guy that we need at offensive coordinator, and I understand Nick Saban's 71 and he's got more equity with his AD. You think that AD is going to stand in the way if the buyout of $3 million? Do you think Nick Saban's getting a no on that? You think Kirby Smart's getting a no on that? You think Jimbo Fisher is getting a no on that? Brian Kelly is getting a no on that. Ryan Day is getting a no on that. Hugh Freeze, first-year head coach. Dabo Swinney went out and got Garrett Riley. These guys at these schools that are really trying to compete at the highest level, that are really willing to do anything. Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Ohio State, Florida with Billy Napier, whoever, USC with Lincoln Riley. You think they're getting told no over a $3 million buyout? No, because they're ready to compete at the highest level. And so what this says to me is that Notre Dame, which claims it's ready to compete, claims it's ready to be a big boy. You're ready to be a big boy. This has to get done. $3 million, I'm sorry, in the grand scheme of college football in 2023, $3 million is nothing, especially, by the way, and I think this is an important part. Marcus Freeman's one of the, I don't want to say he's one of the lowest paid head coaches in college football, but compared to the head coach at Georgia, at LSU, at Texas A&M for sure, at Florida, Florida State, whatever. Marcus Freeman isn't making that much money because he's young, he's new, he's this, he's that. but you got to put the money back into the program. It's $3 million. Notre Dame is going to make upwards of probably, when the new TV contract kicks in, $60 to $70 million a year just off TV. Not off merchandise, not off ticket sales, not off donations, not off licensing, just off TV. You can't not spend $3 million if he's your guy. And so I'll just say this. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the right guy was on the staff the whole time. But here's my question. They just hired the guy off of their staff, Gerard Parker. If that was the guy the whole time, why did they fly Andy Ludwig to campus? Why did they put him up for 3 or 4 days, bring him to a hockey game, talk to Byron Leftwich? I don't think this is a guy that Marcus Freeman really wanted, and I think this might come back to bite Notre Dame. All right, so what we'll do, take a quick break, and when I come back, we will wrap the show. America's favorite podcast segment, Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. Quick break. Be right back. Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. Let's do it, party people.